Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Identity Insights by Indicio. I'm your host, Tim Spring, and today I'm joined by Trust Alliance New Zealand project manager, Sharon Leon. She's here to discuss the Digital Farm Wallet project and its recent finalist status in the Supernova Awards. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us today, Sharon. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Morning, evening, everyone. I'm Sharon Lyon Mabbitt. I am originally from South Africa, now New Zealand. And I'd say my background is in information technology. Started off as a COBOL programmer last century, moved up the ranks primarily in manufacturing and mining industries. So my background is also supply chain. So I'm a supply chain consultant and a project manager. But my passion is around making sure that projects add value because so often we have, especially around IT projects and technology projects, we have projects that technically are successful, but that the business hasn't seen as being successful or adding value to the bottom line. So benefits realization is a really big thing for me, and making sure that projects actually deliver and deliver value to the stakeholders that was originally set out.
Absolutely. So, jumping right in, what is the Digital Farm Wallet in your own words?
Right. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about the Trust Alliance. So we are a kind of not-for-profit collaboration organization in New Zealand in the primary sector. So looking at agribusinesses and the farmer. And what we were doing is we've done a number of research projects around what is the farmer battling with in terms of data, in terms of information, and putting the farmer in the center. Sorry, let me start there. So our problem statement is that at this point in time, the farmer is kind of coincidental to their data. Their data is stored and held by the solution vendors, the providers of their software. And we have this problem in agribusiness and with the farmers is that we have multiple systems and multiple solutions, either on farm or actually in our agribusinesses and not talking to each other. So there's a huge move, and it's been on for a while in New Zealand around data interoperability. Now, making sure that data moves from one system to another system, and how do we get systems to talk to each other without having actually architected this plethora of systems. But for the farmer, it's even worse because actually on farm, they've got multiple number of systems and potentially they need a multiple number of systems. They've got their accounting system. They might have their agri-nutrients system that they're given. They might have their processes system that they need to input data into. They have their, milk processor, all of those, plus actually managing the farm, whether they're beef and lamb or dairy or whatever. And often they have to put the same piece of data in multiple systems. So, for example, a farm boundary has to go in this system and in this way, has to go into the next system. So the farmer's getting really frustrated. And then on top of all of that, we've got regulations and compliance now coming from the government, which says we need to know who you are, what you've done with water quality, what your carbon emissions are, all of that. And they have to then go and find all of this information, which they've entered into a number of systems a number of times, and then enter it into a new system. So the farmer ends up being a data manager, which is not what they want to be. So I guess the problem statement we said was a problem of multiples. The farmer's in the middle, and that's where we want the farmer to be in control. They've got multiple sources of data coming at them, and they've got multiple requests for the same piece of data, or maybe in a slightly different format that then they've got to send out. So this project and pilot project is co-funded by the Ministry of Primary Industries in New Zealand and is looking at how do we put the farmer in control. And the key here is of control, permissioned, and trusted data. And that was where we started looking at decentralization, which is something very new to New Zealand, not new to the rest of the world, but new to New Zealand in terms of the usage of that, or being front of mind. We have had that in terms of our COVID passport, but people really haven't understood it. So it's kind of been in the background. What we're saying is in order to put the farmer in control and be able to permission trusted data And we're not talking about all data points here because that was a big thing about it. We're not talking about creating a big, huge centralized data lake so that all farm information can be put in one place. We're saying that the specific proof points, we talk about digital proofs, that are required, that need to have a level of certainty that this hasn't been tampered with, and has a large amount of confidence, because we're talking about climate disclosures, and this is coming all the way from our end consumers. We're talking about our agricultural business. The farmer needs to prove things. The farmer needs to say, this is how much carbon emissions my farm has, put out for this year. I am from a nitrogen limit. This is how much nitrogen is leaching into the waterways, and they have to be able to prove that. So the concept was, well, let's create a decentralized wallet for the farmer to store those really important key pieces of information that they can then decide themselves who to share it with, rather than the vendor, the solution provider, holding all of that information and them deciding what to do with the farmer's data. So that was how Digital Farm Wallet was born.
All right. So you gave us a lot of information there, which I really appreciate and really went into detail. To really, hone in on the problem you set out to solve, it was creating a way for the farmers to better hold and share their data without a centralized database. Does that kind of encompass it, or would you say it a different way?
It's quite kind of broad because it's not all their data. So it's their important data. It's their key proof points, the things that so we have thing in New Zealand, but New Zealand has this brand promise of being green and clean.
Mhm.
It's now setting out to say that brand promise is now a brand proof. So it's those key pieces of data that can actually be trusted as digital proofs. Not all the farm data, but those key pieces of data. And when I was doing the farmer focus groups, now we're talking about people who probably don't deal with this kind of stuff every day. And how I explained it to them was with an analogy of your petty cash. So you've got your petty cash on the farm, and you've got loose rules around that, and a lot of people can get to the petty cash. Then you've got your bank account, which is slightly more secure, and only a few people can get to it and work with it. And then you've got your bank vault, which is where you keep your really precious diamonds and gold and whatever, and important pieces of documentation. And that's really secure, and not a lot of people can get to that. And that's the kind of data. So we're not looking at your data coming up off IoTs or your transactional data on farm with stuff that your milk temperatures and your VAT every 2 seconds. We're not talking about putting those kinds of data at this point in time into the wallet. It's more around those really key pieces of information that you need to prove have not been tampered with and need to be really securely managed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And shared, sorry, permissioned and shared.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you make a great point, especially around the environmental data, because that does sound like super important things. And I was unaware of New Zealand's very green policy. So that's awesome to hear. So if we could talk a little bit more about the pilot and what was, actually accomplished, if you have any metrics that we could go into, how many farmers tested it out, what were their thoughts on it? How did the project or the pilot project really, run and go for you?
Mm. So the first thing we did, there was a lot of due diligence done, kind of discovery, pre rollout, and that was where we looked at the technology stacks and what was available. Initially, there was a thought that we would develop with an SDK our own kind of technology stack, but it became really clear that we've got really clever vendors like yourselves out there, and why would we reinvent the wheel? We're not an R&D house. In fact, we're a collaboration of all businesses. And so that was when we, after the due diligence, engaged with yourselves, Indicio and Anonymy. The reason why we did Indicio and Anonymy is not because Indicio couldn't do it on their own, or Anonymy couldn't do it on their own, the full stack, is that we wanted to show this interoperability even among vendors. We have a problem in New Zealand, and I'm sure in the world as well, is that you tend to get vendor lock-in. So we wanted to prove not only data interoperability, but vendor interoperability. So it was very important for us to use only like the best vendors that have, the standards that we were looking for, and that could work with other vendors, which was really great to see. So we got our vendors on board, really great vendors. and we set up a prototype, just basically a demo first of all, and we invited our Trust Alliance members to jump on board and take part in it. And we got a whole number of issuers who said, yes, we've got information. Now, obviously, this whole thing hinges on being able to get the information. So initially we thought, oh, that's great. We've got our issuers and we were issuing certain key pieces of information. For us, it's the farm ID. So you need to be able to say, and this is around identity, which is really important. To the farm ID was a verifiable credential that we could get from our federated farmers. So federated farmers is a federated body of membership body for farmers. And then we got our NCAP, which is our nitrogen limit. It's a measure of how much nitrogen is going into the freshwater system. And we got our greenhouse gas emissions coming from a solution provider, one of our members. And we've got our farm boundaries, which is really important as well, because we need to know where these farms are. In terms of New Zealand, we don't have a centralized database of who the farmers are and what the size of their property is. So that is a really key point as well. So it's really around identification, around location, and then around specific proof points. And in this case, front of mind right now is water quality and air quality, so the carbon and the nitrogen. So we got those issuers on board. We set up the technology stacks. So that was our wallet. So to create our wallet came from Anonymy, and then to set up the ability to turn those data points into verifiable credentials, which were our issuing and relying agents from Indusio. We did in record time last year. We had a primary industries big gala event, and we needed to be able to show this prototype working, which we did. And then from there, we went to the farmers and we said, look what we've got. Because we've been talking to the farmers for a while, but talking about this kind of stuff, it's just, it's too abstract. It just wasn't, they couldn't understand. In fact, when I first started on the project, it was like, wow, what are we talking about? Self-sovereign identity, decentralized verifiable credential, decentralized identification. It's a lot to take in and to understand. And what we realized is if we created the simulation environment where we could actually show what we are talking about, it's so much easier for anyone, but specifically for our farmers to understand, because what we want to show is the value proposition. It's all about value proposition. I mean, it's cool to have nice pieces of technology and whatever, but especially for farmers, they're not into well, some of them are. We've got a huge group of actually called the young farmers, and they love this kind of stuff. So they are coming through the ranks. But for farmer in general, give them another piece of technology. They just want to farm. So it had to be around the value proposition. So we had to show them what we were talking about so that they could start seeing the value in applying it and the benefits of using this kind of technology. So the next phase, after creating the ability to create and store verifiable credentials and then pass them on to relying parties or the people that needed to consume those verifiable credentials, was to take it to the farmers in a form of a farmer focus group roadshow. And there we must have hit about more than 200 farmers eventually. And that was really, really interesting, because from that, we realized that what we're actually talking about, this digital farm wallet, and it's got a life of its own, as always in projects when you brand them. So digital farm wallet, everyone's talking about it, but it's not so much the wallet that is the key. It's the verifiable credentials that are the key, and the digital proof points. So yes, we call it the digital farm wallet, but it's about what can you do with the verifiable credentials in the digital farm wallet. So we went to the farmers, we showed them, we demoed it for them, and then they actually they downloaded their wallets, whether it was Android or Apple, and they downloaded their wallets, and then we took them through in this kind of simulation environment where they could actually get initially test verifiable credentials down onto their wallet. So they could actually open up their wallet and see, oh, this is my farm boundary, or this is my test farm boundary. This is my greenhouse gas emission as a verifiable credential, and then show them the ability to share it. And this was in the simulation environment with somebody like a regional council who's got a compliance requirement. They have to comply. and then to a bank potentially. Banks are very interesting because they give the green loans. So if you can prove that you are managing your farm really well, you'll get a better loan from interest rate perspective. And then, so we called it the 3 Bs: the banks, the buyers, and the bureaucracy, which was the government. We didn't say that. Our government house is called the Beehive because it looks like a beehive, so we said the Beehive. But from a buyer's perspective, that's the processor. So we're starting right at the beginning of the supply chain with the farmers. And farmers then need to move their product or produce to producers. And as with that, that carbon footprint needs to move, or the greenhouse gas number, or the NCAP number, or the actual boundary number of stock that they have, anything like that needs to move when it goes to the producer, food processor, sorry. So what we have is now the simulation environment where the farmers can actually get to grips with it, can play with it, and can see it working. And immediately there were things like, right, an incidental thing is that we used the farm ID, created the farm ID, and then we used the farm ID for them to be able to log in to the other farm solutions. And they absolutely loved that. That was like, by the way, you could do this. It's federated login, as if you were logging in with a Facebook account. But the fact that they wouldn't have to have multiple logins and remember them and could potentially use this verifiable credential was very cool for them. Excuse me. So that was one of the things that they really loved. And that this engagement allowed us to get feedback like that from them, to see what would stop them from adopting this kind of solution, and what was really key for them. And what was really key for them, another one, was the fact that they could then permission the data for themselves. Because our farmers, and one of our very big farmers said to me, farmers are by nature suspicious. And if you give me your data, I'll say why, especially when it's like kind of government related. Why does the government want that? Because they are, in terms of greenhouse gas, they will eventually have to pay a penalty if they're not conforming. So it is really key for them to be able to understand what's happening with their data and understand where their data is going. So the permissioning side was really key. But I think one of the biggest understandings or biggest observations there, realizations, was that it's great to have this technology. The farmer thought it was great, but the question was, is the government going to accept this? In other words, is there a need for data in this format to be ingested, either from the regional council perspective or from the bank's perspective? So the value proposition is really with the relying party. So the people that are saying, yes, I want the greenhouse gas emissions and I want it in this way. Because if the banks say, yeah, well, just give me a thumbs up of your greenhouse gas emission and send me an email, the farmer's not going to go through all of this and hold it in his wallet. So the next phase of the project then moved to working more closely with the relying parties in our little pilot project. And we brought on board one of our big TANZ members, Silver Fern Farm meat processor. So they do all the meat processing. They're one of the premier meat processors in New Zealand. And we moved into more of a super user group project phase, where we took their farmers, because they have farmers that work with Silver Fern Farms, and we used their actual data still in the simulation environment. So they had their wallet, and then they had their data that they could download into their wallet. So it was their farm boundary map, it was their greenhouse gas, and then we could say, right, now you can share this, still within the simulation environment. You can share this now with the bank for better green loan. You can share this now with regional council, because regional council are calling for the NCAP, which is a nitrogen cap limit. So they could get a sense of and be holding their actual data. Because that was the thing when the first round, everyone going, oh, can we put in our own data? Because they were typing in, they were actually doing the simulation, they were putting in their own, well, they were using test data, and some of them were saying, no, but I want to put in my own data. They were really excited about getting their own data and seeing it being turned into a verifiable credential, because we could show them on the wallet that the point of the wallet is not so that they can then go and manipulate that data, because that kind of breaks the whole, it's immutable, we can't change.
Yeah.
So the source system, i.e., one of our big members as well is Balance Agri-Nutrients, and they do all the agri-nutrients. There's two big organizations in New Zealand and a number of smaller players, but Balance and Ravensdown. So Balance is one of our members, and we were getting the NCAP and the farm boundaries from Balance. Now, Balance, as a trusted supplier of information, they can deliver NCAP directly to regional council. But now so NCAP was coming into the farmer's wallet from Balance, so it's trusted now, verified. But if the farmer can change it, what's the point?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we could show them in their wallet, this is not about you now going and fiddling, or anybody fiddling in your wallet. This is immutable now. So this is, if it was X coming out of the system, source system, it's X sitting in your wallet. It'll be X when you send it to the bank. And that's the value proposition. It is immutable. It can be trusted. The value proposition is trusted data flowing all the way up the supply chain, and also that the farmers then said, permission based, I'm allowing you to see X. If you know what I mean. So, so the trusted and permission based. And that was really really interesting to see how the farmers related to that, how they got on board with that, but how quickly they realized, well, if the bank is saying, I can send it via email or spreadsheet, why do we need it this way? And that is where we are now with working with the relying parties in terms of legislation and stuff, mainly from overseas at this point in time, because we are very far away from the rest of the world, coming out of the European Union. So, for example, the deforestation proof, so working with the forestry businesses to show they have to prove that they haven't deforested or denuded the forests. So once you get that pull coming, say you have to be able to show trusted data, and it's no longer just a promise, it's actually
Yeah.
proof, then we will be able to then show the value proposition from our issuers to the farmer, to the relying parties, and across the supply chain. Because of course, what we're doing now is laying the foundation for the digital product passport, which is the information that travels with the product, not just sitting from the farmer to their next up their supply chain. But we can take those proof points and put it against the meat product or the dairy product or the wood product that is then traveling overseas.
Yeah. That sounds super exciting. I know obviously you just spoke for quite a while there.
I did.
But to go into that a little bit, so you're saying that each, right, like this cut of steak would have a little verifiable credential, and the end consumer could scan it. Is that kind of where you're thinking of
That,
going?
that's the vision. That is the vision. I'm not saying it's going to be that easy, but in fact, in terms of the digital product passport, that is the vision, that the mini wallet, if you will, with the verifiable credentials, will travel from source all the way along until the end consumer, so that you can prove net carbon zero beef, or totally organic, or New Zealand made, or Angus breed, or whatever it is that you're promising and supplying into the market, that you can actually prove that that is the case. Because we don't want greenwashing allegations. So as soon as you say, well, prove that you are green, and we can't prove that we're green, that'll be a problem for New Zealand. And New Zealand is heavily reliant on agriculture from an economy point of view. So yeah, we need to be ready for that. It is happening already in pockets, but I think as we go further and further, and we are an export nation, we will need to be able to comply. But again, it's when those become demands, pulls from the industry, we're hoping that we are ready, and that the farmers understand, and that our agribusinesses understand how we can actually apply this technology in order to meet that requirement.
All right, awesome. No, that sounds very cool. I definitely look forward to the day where I can, scan my steak and see where it came from. So you mentioned right? Obviously, the farmers seemed pretty happy and pretty excited to take a look at it, and they had some feedback for you, right? Mainly, this is what we liked. This is what, maybe we didn't like. I'm curious, you mentioned a couple of points that they did like, right? Like being able to share it from their phone and things of that nature. Were there any things that they said that maybe they didn't like in the first iteration that you'll be taking into the next, steps of the
Oh,
project?
yeah. Yeah, there were a lot of things around like the UI, which I went to great lengths every time we spoke to farmers saying this is not about a finished product. This is not about proving a product. This is about proving the concept. So, it wasn't absolutely flawless, and the UI wasn't there. It wasn't supposed to be. So there was a lot of things about making, but it was really key points about making it simple to use, and making it easy for the farmer to use, that we could then bring into, um, when we get to actual product development. An interesting one is that a lot of our agribusinesses already have apps or mobile apps. So we weren't trying to compete with a mobile app, but what we can look at now doing is saying that this digital wallet repository, or it's really around the verifiable credentials, can live within a My Balance app that the farmers use, or live within the Silver Fern Farms app, which the farmers already have. So it wasn't about, don't create more complexity and say, now you've got to have another wallet, just for these things. Yeah, when you're already operating in probably two or three mobile applications because of the nature of your business. So that was really good feedback as well, and changed the kind of the way that we look at if there is a need for a generic, maybe a federated farmers wallet for specific purposes, then we can do that. Or if there's a need for a balance that they already have what they call a My Balance mobile app, then we can incorporate the verifiable credentials into that. Um, it will be fit for purpose, and we need to understand the use case in each of those cases. So understanding that the farmer doesn't want a wallet just for the sake of having a wallet, that they already have multiple wallets. If you think if they when they realized what a wallet was, they already have multiple wallets, and we don't want to add to that kind of chaos and complexity. We want to
Yeah.
keep it simple. And it really is about the verifiable credentials, and not necessarily saying, oh, you've got to have a super duper fancy wallet.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think anybody wants, 40 apps across their phone they have to all log into. That's a lot to deal with.
Yep. Yeah.
So we are coming to the end of our time here, but I did just want to touch on, being named a finalist for the Supernova Awards. Curious, if you could talk a little bit about that in terms of, why exactly this technology is a game changer, why people should vote for you to win, your favorite feature, anything like that that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think absolutely the pilot project was amazing. The technology allowed us to, as I say, actually show the industry what we were talking about, a fairly abstract concept, but to make it tangible. So we were able to then create this environment where we could take it out to our stakeholders, our users, the farmers, and the agribusinesses. And for me, technology is key, but people make it happen. So this is a transformation project. And it's not just a transformation within an organization, it's transformation across the ecosystem, which is, how difficult it is within an organization about transforming. And what this pilot project has enabled us to do is start the conversation. And it's so important to have the conversation in such a way that people can understand, can relate to it, and can see the value and the benefit. So super excited to be nominated as a finalist. Was really an amazing project to work on. Has laid the foundation for big things for the future for New Zealand, which is, always awesome to have a purposeful project. And yeah, I just think from a transformation roadmap perspective, the pilot project actually shows us the way, allows us to engage, and allows us to transform the ecosystem.
All right, sounds good. And if you could, just to leave us with, it sounds like right, the pilot was fairly successful. Are there any next steps or next things for the farmers or vendors to look out for?
Yeah, so We are wrapping up the project, the pilot project now that the MPI, the Ministry for Primary Industries co-funded project, handing over all the observations, the technology stack, the business case. And what we're doing is creating a productionization roadmap. So for our members and for non-members to say, if you want to take this further, this is what you need to do from a business case perspective, from a project implementation perspective. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible, because it's one thing to say, yeah, we're really excited and we can see the value, but if people can't see how to. So we've done the why and the what. And now we're busy wrapping up with the how to and trying to make that as simple as possible. This is who you contact. This is what your project team will look like. This is what you need to budget for. And these are the steps in your project to roll out. And we're really encouraging small projects, because something like this, everyone can sit back and say, this is so overwhelming. We'll wait for somebody else to do it. But from our members' perspective, we're really encouraging them to take up a small project and try and create a verifiable credential and look at their pain points and see where that verifiable credential could actually be used. And in that way, rather than trying this big bang approach, is actually get the ball rolling and get traction and start showing some use cases where it's being successfully used. So next steps are really creating that productionization platform where people can actually talk to us, can understand what technology is available and how we used it, and can understand how to do it themselves and push it into the marketplace.
All right, very cool. And yeah, it definitely it starts from the people that want to use it. So glad that that's your approach. Well, that is about the end of our time today. Thank you so much, Sharon, for taking the time to speak with us and really explain the project. It was very cool to learn about. If you at home are interested in learning a bit more about verifiable credential technology, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We'll go ahead and bring you some more educational content. If you have any questions or specific topics you'd like for us to cover, please go ahead and leave a comment below, and we'll be sure to read and address them. Also below, we'll be sure to have a link where you can go vote for Sharon and the Digital Farm Wallet project. So please be sure to do that as well. Thank you all for watching.
Excellent. And thank you, Tim, and thank you, Indicio.